Joined here by the wonderful Lisa Hellmer, and she's done this before with us. She knows what we're doing here this evening, and we're talking about cross training this time with Lisa. Lisa, I'm sure everyone who's listening already is familiar with her, but she has been a lifelong dressage rider and has a reputation for making it really fun for her horses by including a lot of cross training in her work. So Lisa, I'm excited to jump into this topic with you, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Of course. Thank you again for having me. It's always fun to chat.
It is. So before we jump in, I would love to just hear how you're doing. It's October. Are you in kind of the height of your competition season? How are things for you as far as riding and coaching goes?
So it's less hot because we are in Florida full time. So we have like a couple days of fake fall where it's a little bit cooler in the morning and then it still gets into like the mid 80s and 90s, but it's less humid, so we all feel a little bit better. And for us, we're just getting started with our season. So I always take a break in the summer. It's too hot. I don't like it, my horses don't like it. Where we are, we could show all the time and do things and never stop, so I kind of force all of us, my students, my horses, to just, like, settle a little bit over the summer. So I would say the last kind of starting October, really, like, the last 2 weeks, we've been making our show plans, setting some goals, and planning what we want to do for the rest of the year and then moving into the winter season here because that's really when the weather is the best. And I mean, that's kind of the reason we come down here is not for the summers, but for the winters. So,
Yeah, the winters make up for the summers.
yeah, every place has a crappy season. And for us, the summer is hard, although I heard that it's hot everywhere. So I don't think it's necessarily any worse in
That's
Florida,
fair.
but it's exhausting when you're outside all day. I get very drained, and um, but yeah, now we're feeling a little bit more refreshed, and it's actually a great time to talk about cross training because our horses are all rolling their eyes a little bit at us after having a really chill summer. And now suddenly we're all excited and looking at our dressage tests and going, okay, let's go. And the horses sometimes get a little bit zonked out, coming back into the full swing, so
Yeah, I think that's the perfect segue. So, can you start us, Lisa, by talking about what exactly you mean by cross training? What does that look like? How do you define that?
so, basically, what I do every day is I try to do something a little bit different. So, I've worked in a lot of for a lot of other trainers and worked in a lot of other barns, and often it's pretty monotonous. So it's in the ring, maybe a short hack before in the ring, do your 35, 45 minutes of riding, cool out, and then back. So I try really hard to keep it different. And that doesn't just include riding, but also includes working on the ground. So my week starts on a Tuesday. I think, like most horse trainers, I try to take Monday off. So today is a good example. I started with most of my horses and I long lined them. So I'll work on the ground. I'm very fortunate that my neighbor has this beautiful field that has a little bit of an incline. So I actually, if they're well behaved and they won't run off with me, we long line out in the field. So that I like to start my week out with to have that stretch. So lots of transitions. I work them up and down the hill, bending, changes of direction. I like long lining because I can have the feel of both sides of the horse. I the long line too, when I use it, it goes around the back of the horse's legs. So I find that it can help a little bit with like encouraging engagement, for my young horses, it's great because it literally helps with desensitization, so they're not so fussy with things that are touching them on their sides and behind their tail. So that's that's kind of like the first day of my week. And then I'll go into I do ride, obviously we ride in the ring and we ride in our arena, but I will hack horses a lot. I do ride my horses and do their dressage work out in the field. I'll do that on hills. and I don't always do collected work. So we can also get a little bit suckered into always feeling like, okay, I'm doing dressage, so I really need to like have this collected trot and have this collected canter. I like to let my horses open up. I think that we do so much compression work and so much like so many small transitions within dressage that they do need to just feel like they can go and that they can go forward. I also find that that's really helpful for the horses that have to teach their amateurs how to work, right? It sort of takes the mental load off the horses and allows them to just like, oh, I can just canter a little bit. I can be a little bit more open. And I'll say that dressage horses aren't terribly fast, so they think they're going fast, but we're going. It's not like an eventer that's doing, clocking their time or anything like that. So we work out in the field as well as in the ring. And then one of my favorite things to do are my cavaletti exercises. So I always have cavaletti on the side of the arena. So sometimes I'll add them into a lesson, and this summer, we actually started a fun group cavaletti day where we would do Saturday mornings because it's so hot. Everybody wants to ride in the morning. So I'd offer a group lesson and fill the entire arena with poles. And everybody, whoever wanted to ride, could ride in the morning. And we did the cavaletti exercises to music. And now it's become like a whole thing here at the barn. And so I'm going to have to keep doing it through the winter too.
That sounds like an absolute blast. I
Yeah,
love
it's
that.
really fun.
That's amazing. So when you think about the benefits of cross training, you definitely mentioned some, including like just the mental benefit of it for your horses and desensitization and some of those elements. Um, as you think about the benefits to like their how they perform in their dressage test, are there elements that you think about that like with that as well? Like, does it help with suppleness or responsiveness or kind of the bend? Are these kind of things that you're also incorporating into your cross training, or is your primary goal just to kind of change of scenery?
So, yeah, my first goal is always like mental clarity, just to feel like, okay, I don't have to just do 20-meter circles all the time. But it has tremendous benefits physically. So, something that is I think many riders that don't do dressage every day don't realize how intense of an exercise it is for the horse, and especially as you come up the levels. So there is absolutely an element of cardiovascular fitness that's required to be able to ride through. It doesn't seem like a long time, but to ride through a 5-minute test and maintain that posture, that the horses do need to be cardiovascularly fit to do that. So that's a reason why I like to open them up a little bit, get them breathing, um, sort of push that cardiovascular system a little bit more than I would if I was just doing trot circles in the arena all the time, because I do feel that the horses do better in the ring, and I think it helps tremendously with recovery. So they don't get as tired. They're able to bounce back, and just feel better the next day. The other part that I really enjoy that's can be a little awkward at the beginning is coordination. So when you're always riding on a perfectly dragged arena that's level in your nice little rectangle, you don't realize how much the horses do need to adjust and learn how to balance themselves on uneven terrain, even if it's just grass. If you grew up riding outside, you don't even really think about it, but I've gotten horses in training that had really just gone in the arena, and it's actually kind of funny to ride them and feel how much they struggle with their balance on uneven ground or on the grass. So it's really great for their coordination. Also, it's great to load legs. So that's something that we also think about in Florida, particularly. We're always on sand. So everything's really soft. And I like working my horses on harder surfaces too. So that's something that my vet and I have talked about a lot to keep suspensories happy, to help feet grow well, is to be able to ride on harder surfaces. And the grass is surprisingly firm here, even though it grows on the sand. So that helps me build up lower limb strength and, kind of like low impact uh, work there for their tendons and their feet. So that's kind of another thing that I work on. But like you had mentioned, some of the elements that are in the training scale. So when we think about the beginning of the training scale, the rhythm, the relaxation, and the connection, all of those are things that we work on out in the field. And sometimes it's even harder to maintain those when the surroundings are different. Um, and as the horse gets more balanced and more sure-footed and more cardiovascularly fit, I think that's when you can really improve on the elements that are further up in the training scale, like the suppleness, the engagement, and then the collection. So I think when you are really doing like the whole cross training part, you can ride all of the things that you ride in the arena out in the field too. Um, and that's that's kind of, I think, when you feel your horse is the best. When it doesn't matter what the surroundings are, the horse can stay focused. You have your rhythm, your relaxation, you can keep good contact. You have all of your elements of the training scale out in the open as well as in the arena.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. I like the way you're describing all of these benefits. It's like this is something we should all be doing, and I think it is something we should all be doing. So, I'm so glad we're talking about this. So you got into a bit of what your schedule looks like. You on a Tuesdays, you do a bit of long lining. On Saturdays, you do cavaletti with music, hopefully, and a group lesson. Um, what does the rest of your week look like in like ideal, like assuming you're not at a competition that weekend or
Sure.
just kind of like a standard week?
Sure. So usually after I have my long lining day on Tuesday, I'll do ring work on Wednesday. And it does depend a little bit on the horse. So if I felt like the horse the week before had spent a lot of time test riding or something like that. But usually Wednesday I'll go in the ring and I'll feel the benefits of the long lining. And that's when I'll ask the horses a little bit of the harder questions. Or we'll go back to working on some balancing exercises. Like I have a few horses right now that are in the weeds learning their changes. So we go and we do some counter canter work. And I just feel like I've got a little bit of a better relaxation from not having gone immediately like cold into the arena. I also I think this is something that's becoming like more and more and more normal in dressage is like I always hack my horses before I go in the arena. So I get on and I'm lucky I have like this nice little path around the farm and then I go in the arena. So that's kind of part of my walk warm up is they just get to stretch on the buckle and then we go in the arena, do some walking exercises and then get to work. I only work my horses 5 days a week. One of those days usually being like a walking day, like a hacking day. I've worked in programs where the horses went 6 days a week regularly, and I just felt like it wore them out. They were tired, there were more injuries. So that's also something I think that's becoming like more and more talked about too, is that it's more about quality versus quantity. There's always gonna be the horses that if they're not doing something, they get a little distracted. They're little worker bees. Kinda like me, I'm not very good at taking downtime, so I'm happier if I'm doing more things, but I don't need to be worked into the ground. And, I have horses of all ages, so something like a little rule of gauging how much work the horses need to do. Kind of my rule of thumb is if the horse is 3, they don't work more than 3 days a week, 4, 4 days a week, 5, 5 days a week, because their body maturity takes a little bit. I think mentally it's taxing. And like I had mentioned sort of at the beginning, that work doesn't mean riding. So it can mean we're long lining or we're doing a desensitization exercise or maybe our horse decided it wanted to be a doofus and not get in the trailer so that day is going to be we have to practice going in the trailer. I have uh, this year one of my young horses has decided that he's going to be scared of everything, so my round pen has become a horsey haunted house, uh, which, I'm not sure he's super thrilled about, but is actually going to it's my goal for the month is to help him overcome his fears. So right now my horsey haunted house consists of shavings bags that are stapled to the inside of the round pen with, of course, some decorative Halloween accoutrements hanging around there. I have a little skeleton in there, and some uh, what is it, the fake spider webs that are in there just to really set the scene. And so that ends up being one of the things that he works on at least once or twice a week is walking in and out of the haunted house and knowing that he will not die because at horse shows there's flags and there's all kinds of stuff, so I do want to not overwhelm him, but kind of come up with a way that we can manage our stress a little bit so we can work through it. And my goal by the end of the month, which I may or may not get to, is that I can ride him in the haunted house, like that we can ride in the round pen and not have a come apart. So that has been another silly thing that I've added into my cross training for the month of October.
How's he taking it so far? We're almost halfway through the month.
So, very not happy about it at the beginning, like, we couldn't get near the round pen, and mind you, all of the other horses have been fine. So, I think I just have one that's been special. Everybody else goes up to it, they snort at it a little bit, and then they start kinda tugging at stuff. But this one is he was pretty upset about it. So we Sunday was our best day. Sunday we did work on the ground, we worked around the round pen, and then we were able to go in and out of the round pen on a loose line and even voluntarily went up and started sniffing the shavings bags. So we're making
Progress.
progress.
Yeah.
Slow baby steps.
It is amazing the things they choose to be afraid of.
Yes, this is definitely his thing, and, I had to try to make it humorous for myself by
Yeah.
adding Halloween decorations because I was like, "You're being so silly."
If you don't laugh,
Um
you cry.
Right, absolutely, you gotta make it fun because
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I hope that by the end of the month he is in there and you're riding around.
I'll report
Uh,
back, and if not, we might have to make it, I don't know, Thanksgiving themed
right.
for
Yeah.
November.
Yeah. Add some pumpkins.
Yep.
Um, that's awesome. Okay, so I love the way that you approach training with your horses and just like the thoughtfulness that you put into it. Because I think it can be really easy to just get in the routine of every day going in the arena and doing movements from your dressage tests, and
Mhm.
both you and your horse can get pretty frustrated with that routine. So I think this is really a smart way to keep yourself kind of dialed in as the rider, and then also keeping your horses super tuned into kind of what are we gonna do today, and waiting for the next fun, exciting activity. So as we think about cavaletti exercises, you said you always have cavaletti on the side of your arena. Can we talk through? Do you have any favorites or kind of like getting started guide for
Mhm.
using cavaletti? Where do you start, and what are your tips and tricks for integrating cavaletti into your flat work?
Yeah, so there's so many ways that you can use Capoletti in your everyday ride. Sometimes it's like with the horse that I've is very distracted right now. Sometimes it's a great way to refocus, right? Put something in the arena, we've got to trot over it. It's a way to refocus. So that's one of my favorite things to do is to just put a pole in the middle of the arena and we have to walk and we have to trot and we have to canter over it. And as dressage riders, we have markers in the arena, but we don't have to specifically get to that point every time. Where when you're jumping, you have to get to the jump. If you take off too early or you take off too late, it's not a good jump. So we as dressage riders, we kind of like lose our eye a little bit. And I like working on that with a pole because you have to focus on the distance that you're coming at the pole, the length of your stride, the balance, your turn, and nothing bad happens if you mess it up and you chip in or the horse kind of like kicks the pole or whatever. There's less pressure than if it was, a meter 10 oxer or something like that, right? Which for dressage people is very big. Um, but there's less pressure but mentally, it's the same amount of preparation. So it's really important that you think about your turn. It's really important that you think about your balance and to help your horse find that. So that's a lot of times the first place that I start is I'm like, okay, my horse is distracted. I'm not really sure. I'm not getting the transitions that I want, or I'm feeling like I'm not getting enough adjustability, or I have a student that's just kind of struggling with accuracy, whether it's in the moment of the transition, the balance, or like the geometry. And I'll say, okay, well, you need to make it to this part of your circle. Then you're at 20 meters. So you're working on your geometry. Then you're working on your balance. You're working on preparing your turn. And then you're working on sitting down, not leaning with your body or getting left behind. So there's like a lot of things that we can do for rider balance and stride balance and half vaulting. And I mean, it seems silly to just have one pole, but there's almost like endless things that you can do with that single pole. The other thing that's really helpful that I'll use the poles for if you're not going over them is to use them as like guides. So oftentimes I'll talk about keeping the horses on the train track. So if you've got a horse that's really wiggly, or sort of the standard challenge for many of us is just going down that center line and staying straight. So you can use your poles as a lane to kind of help teach you to develop an eye and the balance evenly on both sides. Or if you have a horse that struggles with staying straight along the long side, or you're trying to teach the rider kind of the geometry of where you want to be with a shoulder in, I'll use the pole as a little bit of a guide. And it's also great for the horses because it immediately kind of rocks them back. They notice the pole, they don't want to step on the pole. It can help a little bit get the shoulders back, get their attention, and then all of a sudden you've got a little bit of a better balance. So when I have just one pole, that's kind of where I start. And then you can obviously get super creative with the whole cavaletti outline and setting up, as many as, I don't know, 10 to 15 poles in a row if you want. I usually start when I'm doing my patterns in the arena for the group. I like three. Three is kind of a good number. Um, I feel like everybody can count to three. It's a good place to start. And it's funny when I set up 4 or 5 poles that immediately changes everything. So you kind of either you get through that set and you've got a half halt over the third pole so that you're not running through the last two, or you have to push a little bit to kind of make it to that fourth pole or that fifth pole. So I'll do sometimes even just 4 poles in the arena to kind of help rebalance. I had a great lesson actually. Um, the when was it? I think it was last March or April with one of my coaches, and he doesn't usually teach with cavaletti, but I was having a really hard time getting a quality upward transition from one of my young horses. He just kind of like wanted to drop out, and we were like kind of scurrying into the transition, and like we would canter, but it was a little bit of a sort of the running launch into it. So he set up 3 poles on the 20-meter circle, and it's an exercise that I would do with my other riders, but it was nice to have my coach be like, okay, you got to use this 20-meter circle, really get a good trot. And then after the last pole, pick up the canter 3/4 of the circle, and then trot back over. And after I did it a couple times, all of a sudden my horse was like, okay, I'm balanced in the trot. So then I'm balanced in the canter. Right. And the cavaletti really did the work for me. So because he couldn't run and scurry through the poles, he couldn't run and scurry into the transition. So that was a great example of a really simple way to just use the poles, and it was this great light bulb moment where I was like, "Oh, my transitions don't suck anymore." That was perfect.
Yeah, there's so many use cases, and it is such a logical thing to incorporate. You had mentioned that you could like line up a bunch of poles in a row down the center line, or I mean, there's so many different things you could set up. But as I kind of think about lining up cavaletti, a picture that comes to my mind is just like it if you depending on how you set it up, you could create like a higher quality trot, just
Mhm.
by forcing your horse to be picking up their legs with that kind of frequency. Is that am I? kind of picturing something that is that a real use case? Or and is what I'm picturing kind of not really what one of the goals that you're looking for when you set up those
No,
exercises?
definitely. I'll make one correction on what you said. I would never force the horses to take bigger strides or reach more. The poles, again, they kind of do the work for you. And I've yet to find a horse that doesn't find it interesting, right? Because it's a little bit of a challenge. They've got to think about it. It's not over facing. But say, for example, that you want to develop a little bit more swing or a little more cadence through the trot. So, first off, when you have your cavaletti set for however many strides you have, let's call it four, the horse has to take the same length of stride for 4 steps in a row, which again seems simple, but then when you do it, you're like, "Wow, every single stride was the same," because the poles don't move. The horse has to make their adjustment. So that's sort of the first way that you can feel when you've gotten a good balance, is you go through and you're like, "Wow, my trot did not change for 4 strides through that." And then you can elevate the poles off the ground. So that's really where you start to challenge the horses a little bit more. It asks them to lift their belly and their back and then actually like mechanically lift their legs a little bit more. And that's a fun thing to develop, because then all of the sudden you realize that when you increase the cadence, you actually decrease the speed at which you go through it. So you have a slower miles per hour and you have a bit of a slower tempo, but you have more power. So that in when you're developing, like, let's say we're looking ahead at slowly developing a passage, it's not faster. We don't go through it faster. There actually is this moment of like hang time. So the moment that the horse has to step down on the ground and then lift its leg, put that leg down, lift the next one. As the rider, you'll start to feel the horse come up underneath you, and your tempo actually changes a little bit. So that's a fun thing to feel if you've never felt that adjustability in the trot, or you're trying to start to introduce that to your horse, the idea that like they can add a little bit of that lightness to the feet. That's also a great way to teach riders how to sit to a trot like that, because it's often a lot bouncier because there's a lot more swing, right? The horse is elevating its legs, they're lifting their backs. So, what I'll teach riders to do when they're going over the poles in the rising trot is to almost feel like they hold the up post a little bit longer and they land light. So it's sort of like you're dribbling a basketball, but you're holding the up dribble part a little bit longer, and then the down dribble is light, and then the up dribble is higher. So you actually stretch yourself out of the tack for a moment longer, and that helps your horse's back come up to sort of meet your bottom and gives you this even extra cool feeling where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm trotting on clouds." So it's a cool way to develop your feel of what a trot with more cadence is, and to build your horse's physical strength to hold it, because it's obviously much harder to have to lift your feet and lift your back and then stay in the same tempo and not fall over the poles. Um, but when you're doing it again, it's a low pressure thing. So it's a very safe place to make a mistake. If you get a stride wrong or something, you're not going to do a rotational fall like you would over a big jump. So I find it's a little less intimidating for some riders to try it, because the mistake is an easy fix. So you just roll the pole back to where it was before.
Yeah, that's an important point. I want to hear from you. Is how often are you using poles on the ground versus poles on like cavaletti boxes, like lifted? And when you do use boxes, how far off the ground are they?
So it really depends. You don't have to use them on risers. You can just use them on the ground. There's also like a lot of great ways for anyone who's listening and goes, "Well, I don't have fancy cavaletti risers." Well, that's fine. There's a lot of really easy ways to get cavalettis a little bit off the ground, and you don't have to get like the fancy formal cavaletti riser. Um, and the height of the pole really, really depends. if you've got a horse that's built up the strength and that's confident through it, you can go pretty high. Um, generally I say I'll go maybe like a foot or two off the ground, and you can have them straight across where the pole is like equally on both risers, or what I do a lot because I don't have enough risers is I'll alternate. So I'll have the right pole is up on a riser, and then the next pole will have the left side is lifted. So it sort of looks like a gymnastics line of X's going through, but then your center when you stay in the middle is all kind of a little off the ground. I think when I'm not exactly sure the height of them, I'd have to check. I'd say it's probably about a foot off the ground when they're all the way up, but that's something that you can increase slowly, and even just lifting them a little bit. So say you have like an old 2 by 4 and you wanna just raise the pole a little bit off the ground, even that makes a big difference. It just sort of changes a little bit of the trot and helps your horse figure out, "Okay, I'm not just supposed to, like, plow through these, I actually wanna take that moment to lift my feet." And what I tell my riders during the lessons is that it's the horse's job to go over the poles and it's your job to get the horse to the poles. So that is up to the horse. Like they need to be able to pick up their legs. You can't do it for them, but you can set them up with a good turn, good tempo, consistency through the line, like go straight, don't come at it at a diagonal or in the wrong gait. If you canter to a trot pole, it's not going to work. Again, nothing bad happens, so we'll just kind of, we sometimes we play bowling and the poles are everywhere, and that's fine. Uh, there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Then you just set it back up again. But yeah, it's it's your job to get the horse to the poles, and then it's the horse's job to get over them. So it's really something you build up, and you can go as slowly as you want, or if the horse has a natural talent for it and is just really liking it, challenge it a little bit. The worst thing that will happen is they'll knock it down.
Yeah. You mentioned, making sure that you have your horse has the right strength to, like, go to the next height or what have you. When you have, like, a new student in your program or a new horse in your barn, are you keeping these initial cross-training exercises fairly short just because it's gonna be this horse and rider pair's first time through them? Or do you find that, like, if they're able to do a 30-minute flat lesson, they can probably do a similar amount of time with poles on the ground?
It's a really good question. So you kind of have to feel it out. I think that the horses get a little bit excited about it. So they do better than you would expect them to. Sometimes I think the riders fatigue a little bit faster than the horses do because they have to concentrate and focus a little bit more. It requires a bit more mental energy. Like I said, when we ride dressage, we don't have to, we're thinking about our next movement, but it's very different than in a jumping course situation where you really have to plan your turn, and if you don't get there you're not getting to the next pole, right? We always have a little bit of wiggle room. So if we have to do flying changes across the diagonal, there's always a little bit more room. We're not like, we don't have to do it at the specific mark. So I always find that is the most interesting. Like if I have a group of students and I have some jumpers, or I have some just dressage riders, or some fox hunters, or my eventers. My jumpers and my eventers always remember the Cavalletti pattern. It's like bam, 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 no problem, we got it. You tell us the color, we will go to it. My dressage riders, on the other hand, are like glazed over, and they're like, wait a minute. And I'll always give them a hard time because they have to remember a dressage test, but there's something about memorizing the course that's a little bit different. So sometimes it's more about slowing it down for the rider. So keeping the exercises really simple and maybe doing breaks in between. Also, all of it can be done at the walk. So, say you have a rider that's not super confident or doesn't have the balance yet, but they still want to work on the benefits of the cavaletti, getting the horse to stretch and reach, and then them remembering the pattern and steering and getting the horse to the poles. You can do it all at the walk. It's not that you have to go through and do 45 minutes of trotting. Uh, the walk is just fine. I do think that the more often you do it, you build up fitness for your horses. So when I start out with my young horses, we trot over a couple poles and they're very baby tired. because, like, mentally it was also a lot to think about. There were a bunch of sticks on the ground, and that was weird. But the more you practice it, the better they get. So it really depends, but like everything, if you try to rush something, it's probably not gonna work. If you take your time and just pick away at it, some people like leaving them in the ring, and they just kinda add it into their ride every day, and that's you'll start to notice that it feels really easy, and then you can start to do more challenging things or put them up a little higher.
Yeah, totally. So, as you think about the different exercises that you do with students that are dressage riders versus jumpers versus eventers, or any of the other disciplines that you work with, is there a difference in the exercises that you're doing with them with poles or cavaletti, depending on kind of what their focus is? Or do you find that, like, if you have 4 students coming in a day, you could do the same exercise with all of them and just get something different out of it, or get the like have the same goal for all of them?
Mhm. I'm very much a this is what I set up, this is what everybody rides. Because, like you just said, you can all take something away from it that can be very different. The other thing that I don't do is I don't adjust the distances between the poles. So, say we've got a really big horse in the arena and then we've got a pony. I leave the distances the same because for the pony's got to reach. And then for the big horse has to half halt, which is probably generally what you're working on all the time with those horses. And so you end up leaving with just a different takeaway. Like today I really worked on half halting my 17-2 hand warm blood because he just wanted to plow through all the poles and had to find the half halt through the spacing of the pole. And then the other rider might say, I actually was able to work on opening up my pony's stride and getting a little bit more reach because he had to keep up with the slightly longer step. So I pretty much set all of them the same. And then I find that everybody kind of gets something different out of it. Of course, you can always amend it. So say one horse is really struggling with something and we lower the poles. So we'll if they're struggling or they're losing their balance and it doesn't feel like it's creating a productive trot, the gates should feel better after we do this. It shouldn't feel like they get worse or they get more tight. So we can make corrections, like we can lower the poles or do less in a row. And then it also kind of depends on if you're working on something specific. So I find the cavaletti are really helpful for my dressage riders when we do them in the canter, where many eventers and hunters are like, oh, canter the poles? No problem. We got that. We can see a distance. We can adjust the striding. That's what they do in their jump lessons too. Not that it's not great to also do in a cavaletti lesson, but I find that my dressage riders tend to struggle with that. So canter cavaletti for them is really helpful because they have to work on balancing the canter, seeing a distance, which again we don't really have to ever do in a dressage arena, and and then creating adjustability in the canter. So I would say that maybe the eventers and the hunters might get more out of doing the trot work because they don't focus so much on the trot. We obviously do a lot in the trot, so it's kind of whatever you make of it. Or if you have something specific that you're struggling with, kind of like I was using the canter poles or the trot poles to help me with my canter transition, you can add that in. But it's kind of fun when we just leave the exercise the same and then everyone has different struggles through the whole group and we kind of cheer each other on and figure it out. And the more we do it, the more adjustable our horses get. So it is definitely something that just keep practicing and it gets fun. But I like having a variety of riders because it's fun to see the hunters and the event riders like really good at something else and kind of put in the dressage riders to shame and then vice versa. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So this could be a really silly question, so bear with me. I'm just picturing cantering cavaletti, and I mean I know they're low to the ground, but there is going to be some amount of like bascule or like jump that happens over in
mhm.
order to get over them. What kind of position are you recommend? And I'm sure like your eventers or hunters are going to kind of get out of the saddle when that happens. What is the recommended position when you're
So
cantering cavaletti?
yeah, so at the beginning, like say it's your first time cantering the cavaletti, I just say like get in a light seat and just follow the canter. But what I really like to do, and I actually will do this with all of the riders, no matter what discipline, is teaching you how to sit and how to sit into the canter and stay in a nice seated position. You'll feel the horse use the pole as a bit of a half halt to get the engagement from behind, and then step over the pole, and it's actually just like a nice step of jump in the canter. So I like using it a lot where they're sitting, especially when we have our chronic shoulder leaners that tend to want to like come to the fence and lead with their upper body anyway. This is another great like low pressure way to practice sitting, waiting, and then letting the horse go over the pole. And when they're low, again, there's much less pressure. So say you get a funny stride and the horse chips in or something. I mean, it's 3 inches off the ground. So it's not a big deal. But I like teaching the riders how to sit, wait, let the cavaletti come to them, and then the horse takes the step of canter over. So it's definitely, I find, most beneficial when you sit.
Yeah, I'm sure it's awkward the first couple times, and then you
Yeah,
get the
totally.
hang of it and goes from there.
And for the horses too, right? Because they want to lead with their chest. So it definitely helps like get that engagement, get the sitting and the weight to help. The idea is to help elevate the shoulders a little bit. So it's fine if you're both navigating through it. And yeah, you'll make lots of mistakes along the way.
Yeah, part of the process. So,
Exactly.
I'm sure I mean, mistakes are just the part like, just gonna are inevitable when you're working with exercises like this. Are there any we talked about, like, a lot of do's. Are there any don'ts when you're setting up cavaletti or ground pole exercises or trap poles? Are there any things where you're like, "That's a no in my book"?
So I would definitely consider some safety things with the poles. So if you have them on risers, it is good if they can move. So especially if you haven't done it before, that they can either kind of roll off or move. But you can also have poles that move too much. So I don't like using lightweight like PVC poles or what like irrigation, like old irrigation poles and stuff. Sometimes that's what people have because those you kick and they'll bounce, or they can break because you do have to consider like the horse might step on top of it and then it could shatter. The poles that I use are wooden poles, so just old school wooden poles. I have some wooden poles that are encased in like a heavy duty PVC that are used for jumping. So those are my favorite because they do have a little bit of weight to them without being like super tedious to carry around. I like uh, the cavaletti end pieces that I can slide the poles into, and they have square edges so that there's no points that the horse can get caught up into. So if they decide to like beeline it to the left and trot over the riser part, there's nothing for them to get caught on. It'll pop off. There's no sharp points or anything. The old school cavalettis that you might picture in your mind that have the cross with the pole in the middle, those are great because they're easy to turn, but there's a lot of places to get stuck on. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but there are other options that might keep you a little bit safer if you're worried about horses getting caught on it. And one of my favorite like super cheap things to do is I get the landscape timbers from the hardware store. They're usually like $5. They're not super long, but they have some edging to them, so they're also not round. They don't roll as easily, but they will move. So those are super easy and inexpensive, and they're perfect for kind of cavaletti on a budget.
Awesome, I love all of those tips. If you had, had to, like, had had to fulfill one small change that every rider could make this week to add more variety into their routine, what comes to mind?
Go for a trail ride. It's really nice. Trail riding's great. Or do your warm up or your cool down with a hack. I think a lot of people we just get on, we go to the ring and we do our thing. Go for a walk. Walking is the most important part of your warm up. If you can do it before and after your ride, that's even better. but that's a really easy way to just add some cross training into your day. You don't have to set anything up, you don't have to clean anything up, you can just take your time a little bit, go for a walk.
It's great for horse and rider.
Yeah, that's right.
Are
And
there
don't hack around on your phone scrolling around because we all do it, but just be present in that moment and enjoy your walk.
Don't do it, resist the urge.
Yeah.
I recently removed Instagram from, like, my home screen. I didn't delete the app, but I removed it from my home screen, and it's changed my life. I'm no longer
It's
like
it's really interesting to see how much doom scrolling happens on horseback. And if you I have my phone on me because I always need to be reached, but I try to put it in my back pocket. I try not to look at it and it's hard, but yeah, go for a hack and don't doom scroll.
yeah, totally. Is there a common misconception or common misconceptions about cross training that you wish more riders understood?
You don't have to be very brave. I think some riders want to ride in the arena because they feel safe in the arena. And the reality, I think, is like if it's going to happen in the arena, it's going to happen outside of the arena. So take your time developing your confidence, but it's I think it's a really great way to build your confidence, and it's not actually as scary as you think it is. So, the more you do different things with your horse, the more you'll build up a relationship with them, the more confident you'll get. A more confident you makes a more confident horse. So be brave and leave the arena.
Absolutely. If someone wanted to track the benefits of cross training, what would be the best indicators to watch for, physically or mentally?
Oh, that's a good one. There could be, I feel like there's an opportunity to invent an app here or something, or maybe there is one where you could track your horse's fitness, like heart rate and all of that stuff. So I'm sure there are ways for you to do that. I think you'll notice that overall your horse should feel less sticky when they go in the arena. Like, generally, if I've had a nice day where I had a hack day before, my horse will come in feeling a little bit more refreshed. One of the things, just to like go slightly into a different directions, one of the things that really pushed me into doing this more often is I had a horse that was like really ring sour. He did not want to go in the arena every day. He was not happy doing it. I could tell he'd like stop before even getting to the arena, and I felt this pressure to train on him and work. And basically I was like, all right, I'm not gonna have I don't want to argue. This isn't fun. And I just would take him out in the field and we'd, in my dressage saddle, we'd canter around and there'd be some logs and we'd jump over the logs. And I just felt like I kind of got him refreshed. And then I would go in the arena and I have a good ride. And he really taught me that I don't need to beat the horse into the ground to get it in the arena. And I just felt like mentally we figured things out a lot better. I also found that um, we both had to work through things like our tempi changes were much easier for us to figure out in the field where we had room and we didn't have the confines of a wall and we could just kind of keep playing. And um, I could let him canter out a little bit, or we could go over a log again and kind of hit the refresh. He was always a little bit sticky, and that was just a really, like, clarifying way to do the training without feeling like you were doing the training. And then as a result, I had a horse that was just happier. He would go in the arena, and he very clearly told me he did not wanna go in the arena. So, I think that those kinds of things are great gauges. Obviously, if you're doing it consistently, like, you will notice good top line and you'll notice good muscling, and it's like going to the gym consistently. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think if you're working your horse well, they're going to build muscle even if they just work in the arena. But I think that they want to come in the arena, and that's really fun. And that horse taught me a lot about just doing it somewhere else, or you need to warm up and do a cross rail before you go in your dressage test. And even if I felt silly doing it, it's what helped him. And then, yeah, and now he just goes, right? He's like, okay, I got this, and he likes having his field days and his cantering around, and um, kind of is our good little refresh, and has become a very important part of our lifestyle.
That's awesome. That is a great reason to have gotten into this and to become an expert in variety and cross training and keeping things interesting for your horse. And I'm sure it's paying dividends on with all your students and all your horses that this is such a big part of the way that you train. So we're here at the end of the hour, but I want to make sure to give you an opportunity to share on anything that I haven't asked. Is there anything else related to cross training that you would like to get out there or, yeah, is there anything I've missed?
You know, if anyone has any great ideas that they do for their horses that they find is really, really fun, I'd love to hear about it. When I lived in Virginia, one of the things that I considered cross training is we had a pond and we would take our horses swimming. And that was super fun because we just had a good time and the horses splashed in the water, and it was like a nice way to end the week. Uh, so if someone else has some fun things that they like to do with their horses, I'd love to hear about it, because I'm always kind of game for taking my horses out and doing something new. Last year, in at the end of the month, at the end of October, I went on a Halloween hunter pace, and that was really fun because we don't usually jump things, and some of my dressage horses were like, "Ah, there's costumes, but we're going on a trail ride and that's fun." So that was entertaining, but we went on a Halloween hunter pace, and that's something I did a lot growing up, but I hadn't done recently as a trainer, so I considered that a nice day of cross training. So yeah, I kind of just like to throw it back to others, and like, what do you do that you find really fun?
That is perfect, and I think, that you're making me think that maybe one of our upcoming monthly challenges should be prompting people to, like, include cross training in their routine that month and report back on how it goes. So,
Yeah, yeah. Or if you came up with a cool exercise or did something that you found was really helpful, that would be great.
yeah, share it with the group. Awesome. Well, Lisa, this has been so much fun. You are a wealth of knowledge on the topic of cross training and so many topics, but we really appreciate you being with us here this evening.
Yeah, glad I could join. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for submitting your questions, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.